All right. Happy Thursday night, viewers. I am author Sierra London, and along with my co host, writer Michelle Ingrid, we are Women on Words Live. Tonight, our special guest is Lyndell Williams, author Lyndell Williams, and we're so happy to have you here with us on the show tonight.
I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Now, everybody, if you're new to the show, be sure to go over to the Women on Words Facebook page because you can actually comment on whatever we're talking about during the show and ask our guests questions, but you have to be on the Women on Words page. So, like it, follow us, and let's go ahead and get started. So, Lindell, my first question is tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, how long you've been writing, and what you write.
Okay. Well, I'm a New Yorker, born and raised, Strong Island, and I've been writing fiction now since 2018. That was when I
Okay.
released my first book. Let me put this on Do Not Disturb because no one bothers me all day until I have something to do, and then my phone blows up.
True.
I know, or Alexa.
Exactly. So my first release was 2018, but before that, I was a writer for multiple platforms and also the managing editor of NBA Muslims, Native Born American Muslims, a cultural platform that centered the lives of African American, European American, Native American, and
Yes.
Hispanic American Muslims. And now I write my books, my romance books, and I homeschool my kids, and I still write for
Ooh,
multiple
God
platforms. I'm a
bless you.
professional writer on top of being an author. So I do a lot of writing, a lot of keyboard clicking. And
Sorry.
I've always been into romance since I was a teenager, long before I should have been. Just
Okay.
saying.
No such thing.
I
No
know.
such
I
thing.
know.
I
Like
was real young. And one of the things that this, like, I don't want to age myself, but I don't mind. I was Beverly Jenkins had just come out a
oh
couple of years
yes.
after I got into romance. So I
Okay.
spent years as a young teen reading romances that centered white women constantly. And if there were
Yes.
any black women, they were in a servile role because historical fiction was one of my favorites, not so much contemporary.
Yes.
Or, they just really, they were really there to prop up the white female character
Mhm.
in some way or serve as the target of a male character in the book. So I
Mhm.
saw that for years and years, and then finally Beverly Jenkins came on the scene, and Brenda Jackson, and so I ended
Yes.
up studying literature in college, and my master's thesis actually centers on American Muslim romance novels.
Wow.
Oh,
They're
Impressive.
small but growing, that feature
Mhm.
love it.
mainly African American Muslims are the ones that are doing it. So just like African Americans are always the ones forging ahead and cutting those and being the pioneers.
Risk takers. Yes.
Yeah, we're always the ones. And
Yes.
so after I finished my thesis and I got tired of being an adjunct, I decided, I really want to write my own romances and I want to center women who look like me
Uh-huh.
and who have lives similar to mine. And I want people to see themselves at those intersections that I share with them. And so
Hmm.
I released my first book, an AMBW romance, African Asian man, Black woman, My Way to You. And it really, I did not expect it to be as popular as it was. So I was very grateful about that. Yeah, because I really
Oh,
wanted to when I write, I want to center the romance, but I also want to center how life can impact the way we fall in love and stay in love.
yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'm glad you said it that way, like fall in love and stay in love. But I have to
Don't
ask
ask my
you.
question.
Okay, go ahead, Michelle. You
No, you
ask
go.
your
I'm not going.
you go on. Ask your question.
Okay, so I'm glad you said that because I noticed you write a lot of stories with married characters or
Yes.
characters dealing with issues that are formed after the marriage. Like in The Groom, he's left with a baby after his
Yeah,
wife leaves.
yeah.
And so I'm curious when writing stories for married characters, do you have to approach it differently than how you write stories for your single characters?
Well, I spent quite a few years writing short stories, and so one of the main differences between short stories and writing not novellas or novels is that oftentimes the relationship has to be established already, because you really don't have the page space to build that relationship from scratch. The meeting, the resistance, the
Yes.
finally like falling for each other type of thing. So oftentimes I wrote quite a few short stories, and actually my first romances were stories published with Love Journey Books. And
Okay.
so it's with established relationships. So when you do that, it's really about the one of the fundamental elements of romance is what is it that what is it that threatens that relationship. And so that can happen even after the relationship is established. So you mentioned the groom, where his wife left him with a baby. He was already married. In my novel Sweet Love Bitter Fruit, which is actually book 2 in my brother-in-law series, the couple's married. The married couple,
Yes.
Marcus and Tony, and they're very much in love with each other.
Yes,
Tight,
Marcus and
tight,
Tony.
and but life happens and it
They're
starts to
dealing with
shake at the
so
foundations of their
selfish.
relationship. They struggle with infertility.
Mhm.
Marcus and Tony's getting more distant because of the pain that she's feeling. And Marcus is getting very frustrated because it's just more stress. He just wants his woman. And there's all this other stress. His sister is getting stalked. And there's an intern
That
that,
damn intern.
oh, yeah,
Mhm.
she
Excuse my
really,
language.
yeah, Phoebe. She was really a trip in the whole book, especially for someone like Marcus, who is very much a control. He's the alpha. So
Mhm.
he's the alpha that all the alphas in his group look to and respect and ask his advice and everything. And so he gets shook up by this little woman who just will not just even respect the boundaries that he set as far as his own personal space. So I wanted to show things like that. And I want to show like the realities of how people can be. I try to put a lot of realness in my characters. So for instance, Marcus is a demisexual, and that's someone who does not is not interested in sex unless he has an intimate bond with that person,
Wow.
which is the reason why, like, I can have those birds that mate for life. That's the type of person that Marcus is.
That's what most women want right there.
That's what most
That's
women
it.
want.
That's what
That's
they
what
want.
most
We may
women
not
want.
have known that word until today, but
Yeah,
that's
very
what
much demisexual. Well, I mean,
Write
if
that
if his
down.
relationship with Tony broke up, he would have to make an emotional connection with another woman
Mhm.
or another person before he becomes sexually attracted and wants to have sex with that person. So here is this white woman who thinks that, like, of course this black man's going to want me because look at me, I'm a pretty white woman. And he's just like, can you just back up and stop calling me Mark? My name is Marcus.
Okay. Okay, I can
A
respect
rarity,
that.
but a reality.
Yeah. So I have to ask you, when you're crafting your characters, like you said, who are traditionally Muslim women, are you writing from your own experience, or how challenging is it to research in that community and build like a kind of a realistic character? Because it's not a character, like you said, it's a growing body of literature. So
Mhm.
we don't have a lot to go on. So tell us about that process of crafting a realistic character and showing intimacy in this particular population in a very positive kind of open way.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why I'll address one and then the other. When it comes, it's so funny because I was just on TikTok last week or 2 weeks ago, and it was like this whole thing because one white author was all upset about diversity, and then I had to do a post on a blog hop about diversity with a bunch of other white authors. So I was a little frustrated by the end of it because it is very important to have, as authors, we all want to include, unless purposefully, we the characters kind of tell you who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you know my first book, they're not Muslim characters. Simon and Regina, neither of them are Muslim, and because they just weren't, they told me that they just weren't Muslim. And so with my Muslim characters, they just tell me who they are and what is the situation that they're in. And some of it is actually drawn from real life. So, like in the book The Groom,
Mm-hmm.
uh, there is like this because Muslims are the most diverse religious population in the United States.
Mhm.
There is an increasing amount of interracial and interethnic marriages. Okay, and some ethnicities and races fight very hard against it. So in the groom, Mansour is very much into Faiza. He's Arab and she's African American. And he's very much into her. They grew up together. And, he goes away, he comes back a man. And he's just like,
Mhm.
oh, Pfizer? Yeah, that's right. I
Mhm.
mentioned to you. And his mother was like,
Hold
slowly
up.
roll, back it up. And even though she watched Pfizer grow up, her and Pfizer's mother were very close friends. The whole idea of an African American woman marrying her Arab son was not something that she could tolerate. So she put the wheels in motion to make sure that he married someone else, someone that he wasn't in love with, someone who felt the same pressure as he
Mhm.
to be married. So she married
Mhm.
him, and that's how they connected. But that wasn't enough. So his first wife is not a bad person.
I love that about it.
She's
Yeah.
not a bad person. Zainab just she got married because just like Mansour was like, you need to get married. So she got married and she realized, I'm not happy and I'm
Mhm.
falling apart as a person and he's a jerk. Like straight
Yeah.
up, he's a jerk. And I got to go. I have to save myself. So that's what she did. And so I just wanted to kind of show those types of things in my books. And so it's a lot of it's drawn from, I've been Muslim for years. I converted.
Okay. All right. Don't disclose
No,
anything you don't want us to repeat.
I converted when I was 18. And I'm not 18 anymore. And so
I like
I'm
when you
So
say
actually
it's
that.
just me. It's just
I'm
me.
actually 50. I'm actually 50. So I've been Muslim for quite a number of years before I got married to my husband. And so just a lot of things that in the culture that I've experienced myself and I've seen other women experience. It's a very dynamic culture and there are
Mhm.
layers to it. So the African American Muslim experience is a very specific experience. And that's the main one that I draw from. And so my stories very much reflect things that occur in African American Muslim culture. One of the big ones is the targeting of Black and African American Muslim women by non-Black men in order to seduce them because they're attracted to them and they want to take them to bed, but they don't want to necessarily marry them. And so that's what happens in my book, Building on Broken Dreams. The main
Okay.
character is
Mhm.
seduced by an Arab man.
Mhm.
And when she pops up pregnant, he's like, get rid of it and get out of town because
Wow.
I'm not marrying. I already married my cousin, and that's it. We was just supposed.
Yeah.
I'm only supposed to have fun with you, even though he was in love with her, and so that leads to a whole bunch of other things.
Oh, okay. Well, Michelle, do you want to go next? Because I have a question piggybacking on what you just said.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So you have a new book that just came out on the 3rd of September, Open to Love. And
Mhm.
that book opens and the hero and heroine well, the heroine, we meet her up front and she's the second wife to our
Mhm.
character. Is it Mahmoud, Mood Man?
Yeah, Mood Man's Mahmoud.
Mahmoud's
Okay,
second wife.
okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so she's the second wife. And before you can go too far, like they already falling apart.
Well, she was cool with it, and actually, that's a re-release. It was originally
Mhm.
released with After Hours publication, and it's
Okay.
been unpublished, and so I've actually revised and expanded it. So there's a
Okay.
little bit more stuff going on with Fahim and Hafsa in that one. And Hafsa, she's in her 30s,
Yes.
mid 30s, and again, she decided she wanted to be a wife and a mother,
Mhm.
and so she meets Mahmoud, who's like this well off, handsome Arab
Very
man.
handsome.
He's
Very
very much in
sexy.
love. He loves her and everything, but he has a wife, and so she's down with.
Yes.
She says she's okay with becoming a second wife, as long as she can stay with her family on Long Island. He lives in the city. That's where they
Yes.
met when she was working in the city. And so at first he's like, yeah, I'm cool with it, especially since that makes his life a little easier in some ways. Like his second wife's not right there around his family all the time, so he
Yes.
gets to have her to himself. And then he changes the rules on her.
He does, but he hits her with a very heavy issue right up front, and that's what's going on with his first wife.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he discloses something like right up front about their relationship going to the next level as husband and wife. And I think of parents when I say the next level. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so how often, like, is that a realistic issue
That
when you
actually
tell?
was I know the person that happened to. I actually, it's funny.
Okay.
Spoilers, the book that I'm working on now, book 4 in the Brothers-in-Law series,
Yes.
has a woman, she agreed, she agreed to become a second wife too.
Okay.
And he lifts her up, she lives in New York, and he moves her to Los Angeles. And she's spoken to the first wife on the phone. And so he sets her up in an apartment in Los Angeles. And they're fine, until his wife shows up. His first wife shows up one day with a baby in her arms, a newborn. And the reason why he married Hawa is because his first wife is always high risk pregnancy. And so he didn't want to go months and months without sex. And so she agreed to let him have another wife for that time period. And so she
Oh.
shows up at Howard's apartment and is like, yeah, your job is finished.
Oh no. This
I
doesn't
know
sound good. This
everything
doesn't sound
happened.
good.
And I'm going to have don't worry, Muslim readers, I'm going to have functional polygynous relationships. Okay? What the brothers actually have 2 wives. Faisal has 2 wives. Faisal ends up with 2 wives. But and in my upcoming paranormal series, there's going to be polyamorous relationships. There's going to be polygynous relationships there too. Quite a few of them actually.
Okay.
Because alpha males.
Yeah.
and so yeah, these are things that happen that occur. But so also do the positive things like the relationships that they find that Hafsa finds with the
Yeah.
younger man Fahim. Okay. With the relationship that Howard finds with Brandon, who's one of the brothers-in-law, and with the relationship that Miriam finds. I mean, Adam is very much in love with her, and he's a rich white man, and he can have whoever he wants. And he's like, I want her. I'm not ashamed of her. And mom and dad, you can suck it because if you don't like her, I'll cut you out my life. And that's just the way.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting in your re-release and Open to Love what the current husband is asking of the heroine. I mean, she's
Oh
kind
yeah,
of on
and he
her
tries to
own.
manipulate her very, very. He's
Yeah.
really dirty to her. He because he wants her. So instead of treating her with respect and dignity, he's a narcissist. So he is very manipulative of her.
Yes.
So he leaves her struggling for a long time.
Yeah.
But she says, she says to her friend Tarika, I love myself more. I love him, but I
Mhm.
love myself more. And I'm not down with it. I'm not down with doing what it is that he wants me to do right now. And
Yeah.
so that's the end of that, and it breaks her heart, and they do some
Yeah.
stuff to her. I mean, the way that wife, uh,
Well, just the greeting on the phone
oh yeah,
when they're going through,
what
and
do
I
you
have
want,
to
whore?
ask you this too, because you use a lot of terms I think that are specific to the culture.
Yeah,
And I wanted to ask you about that too. Like how do you bring the reader in? Like a reader like me, this is new culture to me, and understanding that that as well, and how important is that to actually, infuse your
yeah,
writing
yeah,
um, with, like you said, some of these real situations that are happening in the African American Muslim community, specifically, and then the process
yeah.
that she has to go through. And I think what it seems like some of the husband's responsibilities to her until they are done with each other are
Yeah,
divorced.
there's a
Yeah.
waiting period. Well,
Hmm.
the language is very important because I want Muslim readers to see the culture in the writing. And I've the first in the beginning I was very overzealous about including as much of that jargon as possible. But there's some readers, some non-Muslim readers, like, okay, well, I know assalamu alaikum and wa alaikum assalam, but what is this other word here? And what is this word and that word? And I don't want to keep on looking in the glossary. So I got some very good advice from another Muslim romance author, Zara J. And she was just like, you really have to consider how much you're going to include and how, because if you include too much, then not all your readers are going to be able to connect. Okay, so I try to only include those words that I absolutely have to. And if it's an interracial relationship, then there's going to be there will be a lot more words, because in addition to the common Muslim terms that like all Muslims generally know, and even in I always say, when you're African American, you always got that one Muslim cousin or uncle or aunt. Like
Okay. Okay. So that's in every culture.
so
Okay.
you kind of know there's some words that you know, type of thing. Like even if you don't know how to say them correctly, you're familiar with them if you hear them. And so I try to stick with those words. So assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam, alhamdulillah. I stick with those words, and I only include other words when I absolutely have to. And even in this new book, Trapped in Sin, I tampered down to salam, so that it's easier for non-Muslim readers. And the Muslims say salam to each other. They always say the full greeting. They'll say salam to each other as well. So because I wanted readers to connect. And as far as like the things that happen, and I wanted readers to have that's how the drama happens. Drama happens in romance. And so I put a Muslim context on it. Now I can't do it outside of very specific cultural parameters, because there's so many layers to American Muslim culture. So I can include Desi American Muslims, but I'm not going to come from that standpoint of Desi American Muslim culture. So like I have Desi characters. Fahim is Desi. His family is from India. So there are certain aspects of the culture that I'm comfortable with representing, including, but I cannot speak to Desi American culture. I would rather read something from a Desi American Muslim author that has that, and they are out there. So I very much focus African American Muslim culture. I can't even do like African culture. I may include African Muslim characters, but I'm not going to speak to and speak from this point of that culture, because it's not my culture. My experience as an African American is not the same as someone from coming in from the diaspora. It's a very different cultural experience. So I try to respect that. And that's one of the things that, because I'm constantly asked by other authors, especially white authors, well, how do you include that? And so when you can include any character you want, just make sure that you research that character. You understand that you cannot just be like putting a white overlay on that character, okay? Unless there's a very specific reason. And you can't speak about the culture. You can't speak from that cultural standpoint.
Absolutely.
Like let authors from that culture have an opportunity to share their stories from that standpoint, because it'll come off a lot better.
Absolutely.
Anyway, and it'll benefit literature more.
Yes. Michelle?
As a fellow New Yorker, I love to throw that in every time we do the
She does.
So I graduated from Brooklyn Tech 150 years ago. And I have to admit that when I went, it was an extremely diverse place. And so it's a lot of fun to see you write characters in the New York space in a world where they exist, but we don't talk about it so much. And so I was wondering, when you started writing and you said, okay, I'm going to write these characters into this space. Are you ever intimidated in writing the characters outside of that New York space that because we know New York's diversity. We know what it looks like. Is it more difficult to write characters in a space outside of New York where you're not as familiar with the community?
Well, all of my stories are set in the Northeast. I'm kind of like Stephen King in that way. Like,
and them off to different places. You sometimes let them go different places.
Yeah, sometimes I let them go to different places and they come back. But I think that when you think about the Northeast, there are some commonalities and experiences. So, for instance, some of my stories are set in Philadelphia. Okay, and because there are some common experiences among African Americans experience and the Muslim experience and the African American Muslim experience. It's just like an interconnect and everything like that. So I feel very comfortable with that. My family's from the South, and I've been dying to do something like in Louisiana, because that's where my family's from.
Uh-huh.
We from Lettsworth, Louisiana, Baton Rouge.
Uh-huh.
I have a good friend from Baton Rouge.
And, and it's so funny because when I'm yelling at my kids, I sound like my grandma. And then my husband's like, "Why do you get that twang when you yell at your kids?" I'm like, "Northern migration. What are you talking?"
That means you haven't taken them to Louisiana enough.
Like,
Yeah.
but I'm
That's funny.
actually like, I would have to go down there and spend some. I have to get reacclimated because I have not spent a whole lot of time down there since I was a kid. So it's just
Yes.
I'd have to go back down there and feel,
Feel
Louisiana.
it out. Okay.
Because one of the things as a cultural critic that I just do not want to do is I don't want to misrepresent the culture. And I've been called a couple of times. I've been called out a couple of times.
Hmm.
I one reader, even though I researched it, and that's another thing. Like sometimes you have to understand that cultures aren't a monolith. So what may not bother some people in some cultures
Yes.
will bother others. So just be
Hmm.
prepared for
Hmm.
that. And so one reader did not like the fact that I mentioned that Simon in my first book had almond shaped eyes.
Okay.
Even though I researched it and I'd asked, like, how do you describe an Asian person's eyes? And that was what the research turned up. And she was like, no, just why do you have to mention eyes at all? We're targeted so
Oh,
much because of our eyes.
Mhm.
oh.
That, like that. And and even like authorship, like I had one white character, one white author, she got slammed for saying that the black female character had chocolate skin. I was like, you can't write that. And she was like, but black authors do it. I'm like, are you black? Okay, then roll back on calling black people food, describing black characters as food. That's something that that's very indicative from within the culture. That's part of the of black African American literature. African American authors like Langston Hughes. That's how he described his characters, but that doesn't give you permission to do it. So I stay in my wheelhouse and what I'm comfortable with, and I really don't feel like I have to go beyond that. Just until I'm first of all until I'm comfortable, and just because people are like, well, you just write about people in New York. Okay, so you just write about
Yeah.
people in New York. You want to see? Okay, so do you like them though? Do you,
Yes.
You're like, oh,
Excellent
you
point.
like my characters? Do you like my stories? And I actually had like one of the interesting things about my new book, Trapped in Sin, is that I the Daisy characters very much are a breakaway from that model minority myth about South Asians.
Mhm.
They're
mhm.
criminals. They're in jail. They're reciting Quran and everything, but they're in jail. And so I actually startled quite a few people. And I'm like, are you trying to tell me that there aren't any Daisies in jail? Because I can tell you right now, my husband is clergy in the local jails here. And yeah, they're there. It's
I got a
Daisy.
question about that book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, Trapped
So,
in Sin?
so I have to ask this question because my job here is to do the readers' work for them a little bit, and the readers want to know: will there be future stories with Nadir, Veer, and Danny?
Ah, yeah. All of them have
Okay,
gone.
All right.
you
There's
heard it
four
here.
more.
She said yes.
I said yes.
Okay.
There are four more. It's the Sinners series. So if readers see in the top,
Hmm.
there's a little
Hmm.
logo that
Hmm.
says Sinners. Again, the characters told me who they were,
Hmm.
and they're like, yeah, we need our own stories. And so each one of them are gonna have stories. So Nadia, which is everyone's chomping at the bit, he's gonna be the first one, him and Man. Because at the end of the story, like in the middle of the story, Nadia is making fun of Baz because he's
Uh-huh.
with one of them good Muslim girls. He's like, why? He's like, that's why I F with the good Muslim girls because they get into all kinds of trouble. Then he sees Imani, who is like all
Mm.
black, face covered, everything like that. So he sees Imani, very much wants her, and he pursues her, ooh, with a vengeance. And it actually is a very tumultuous relationship.
We love that.
Mhm.
Next year, because I have the Savage bloodline, I have to just,
Yes.
Mhm.
I have Savage bloodline. I can't wait for that one. And then Veer, the one that the who he met in jail, That was the Indian convert who he met in
Mm-hmm.
jail. Baz met in jail. He's going to have his own story, and he's going to be with Damina. He calls her Mina because she's
Mm-hmm.
an expert counterfeiter. That's all I'm saying.
Ah, I love that. Okay, y'all. So we're already out of
Ooh.
time. So you have to tell us, Lyndell, where should readers start reading in your catalog if
Mm-hmm.
you are a
Mm-hmm.
new to them author? So what do you recommend? And then where can they find you online, from day to day?
Okay. Well, it depends on the steam level that you want. If you
Okay.
want it
Oh.
to be really hot and hot, heavy steam, I
That's a
would
lot of
start with
hearts.
probably Trapped in Sin because the steam level goes up and up and up from there. Because there's a lot of, yeah. And Brothers-in-Law is a little ratchet down from that steam, even though I don't know, Brandon and Howard are misbehaving in this draft. I'm like, look, the rest of your friends not doing all this. He's like, I ain't the rest of my friends. So definitely Trapped in Sin. If you want to start off, if you are an avid reader who likes to start a series, then of course My Way to You and the Brothers-in-Law series because we're into book 3 and on to book 4. If you want something that's really light in the steam department, then The Groom, and that's part of the Ramadan romance series. And there will be another one of those.
Oh,
Zainab is
okay.
going to get her
Cool.
story. So I'm going to actually go out of my comfort zone because I prefer to write African American women,
Mhm.
whether they're Muslim, non-Muslim, Christian, whatever. But Zainab is Arab American, so I just felt like she just needed her
It's
own
her
story, and
story.
readers were like, "But what about Zainab? She's nice. Why are you just
Oh.
going to leave her by herself with her psychiatrist?"
Okay. You got to
You can
do it.
always find me at www.laylawriteswell.com and across social media. It's all Layla Writes Love.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight here on
Thank
Women
you.
on Words. Your website is scrolling across the bottom, so check her out at LaylaWritesLove.com. And she's always on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram. You're very active. So yeah. Oh, and do you want to mention your blog right quick?
Oh, I have a fabulous blog where I write posts about being a writer and about life in general, about love, and I also feature other authors when they have new releases and things like that. So it's a really great opportunity for authors to have their books featured, and it is growing. My blog is definitely growing. I can't
Yes.
believe how fast it
Yes,
is growing.
yes, it is doing fabulous. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us here on Women on Words. Tonight's sponsor is the Lunchtime Chronicles Season 4. You can pre order all 10 books now. That's the first time ever it's on pre order, and the first release drops on September 22nd. All right, so until next Sunday at 3 p.m., we'll be back for book club. All right, and we are reading Naima Simone's The Road to Rose Bend. So until then,
Get out
be
here.
awesome, be amazing, be wild. Good night, ladies. You two stay on the line. Bye, everybody. Y'all waving. Bye. Bye.